episode of the Project Egg Show. I'm your host, Ben Gothard, and today we have the honor of speaking with Judson Laipply. How you doing today, Judson?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Ben?
I am doing fantastic, and I'm so excited to speak with you because I really want to hear, what is your story?
Well, I'm most known for one specific thing, and that is for being the world's first YouTube viral video. I started speaking back in 1988, 1999 time, working on becoming a professional speaker, and created this thing called the evolution of dance that I did at the end of my programs. And then several years later, uploaded it to YouTube so I could get an embedding code to put it in my MySpace profile. And then unbeknownst to me, over the next couple of weeks, it started being passed around and being emailed around, and it went quote unquote viral. And so I had the good fortune of being the first YouTube viral video.
That is amazing. So it wasn't even something that you were planning on doing at all.
No, I mean, at that point in time, previously before that, the only viral videos that really existed were ones that were sent in actual packets, which meaning somebody forwarded the entire video. And so the length of time and the quality of those videos was so low because most people at the time didn't even have high-speed internet. It wasn't kind of across the whole country yet. So most of us were still downloading things via modem. And so to download a full packet that included a video would have taken a long time.
Right. So why was that part of your speaking, like part of your presentation?
Sure. So it was twofold. One, I got some really good advice from a mentor early on that says, listen, when you work as a professional speaker or you are a public figure in that aspect, you have to do something, or you have to have a signature story, a signature bit, a signature thing that people will remember you for and can identify you by. If you look at even some of the famous comics, a lot of them have a signature bit that kind of helped propel them to that level. Jeff Foxworthy had "You Might Be a Redneck." Chris Rock had a real signature bit that became his thing for a while. And speakers are the same way. Stephen Covey, everybody knows 7 Habits, Norman Vincent Peale, all of those ones. And while that's not the only thing they do, that becomes the thing that they're most identified by. So I had been looking for something that I could do that would be that piece. I talked a lot about change and a lot about evolving and evolution. And I was watching somebody one night it was a comic talking about the dances that go along with songs, that when there's a specific song played, everybody does that dance. And I remember thinking, that's pretty funny. That's true. There's a lot of songs. It'd be funny to see some of those in a medley. Actually, that'd be funny to see some of those in order. And that's when I came up with the idea for the evolution of dance, wrote it down on a piece of paper, learned how to mix music on my computer, mixed the first track that was about 2.5 minutes long, 12 songs, went out and tried it that following week, and it went over real well. And so then I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And between the feedback from the audience and then the suggestions from the audience of stuff that I should include over a 5-year, 6-year period, that grew to the 6-minute routine that eventually became the viral video in the first place.
That's amazing. So you're getting the embed code to put it on MySpace. And before you know it, hundreds of millions of views on YouTube. That is incredible. So once that happened, how did your life change based on that one video?
Fortunately for me, it didn't change a whole lot. So I had been working as a professional speaker about 6 years. I was really lucky that when I was younger, I knew what I wanted to do pretty much for my whole life. I've always enjoyed speaking. I've always enjoyed that aspect. And when I started doing that, I was working hard to build that brand and build that business, so to say, within a certain circle. And then luckily, if you have something like a viral video go, you can then expand that circle. And I think what happens a lot of times, especially with people who have viral videos, is they try to pivot and they don't have the foundation from an experience standpoint to help sustain them moving forward. So it did change a little bit. And I got a ton of publicity. I got a ton of PR. I got millions and millions of dollars of exposure that I probably never would have gotten. So I always liken it to basically my rocket ship. My career got put on a rocket ship. And this is also pre-social media time too. So this wasn't, you couldn't then turn around and take that and turn it into a new platform because there was I couldn't even get on Facebook at that time because I didn't have an edu email address. So you couldn't do that. There was no Instagram. There was no Twitter. And so it was nice because it just became this this grounding thing that kept propelling me forward. And it gave me a lot more exposure, but I was also able to continue to do exactly what I was doing previously, just on some bigger stages.
So I'm interested to learn, in your early years, why was speaking such a draw for you? Like, and it's a two-part. I want to ask a two-part question. One, why is it such a draw? But two, how did you know that that was your thing?
I really knew in probably about 10th or 11th grade. If you look at it from a psychological standpoint, I'm the third child. I was constantly seeking attention. So I liked being in front of groups. I was a bit of a ham. I felt comfortable in front of groups. I never took took a theater class. I never got into the dramatic side of it. But my parents were big fans of a guy named Zig Ziglar, who was one of the original pioneers in the speaking world. And they were also big fans of a gentleman named Og Mandino, Mamie McAuliffe, and all these other speakers. And so they used to listen to a lot of those tapes. They used to have a lot of those books. And I kind of got into that in high school. And I remember having I don't want to say easier time, but what I focused on and the way I viewed the world seemed to be a little bit different than everyone else around me at the time. And I didn't get caught up in some of the same things that my friends were getting caught up in. And I remember thinking that would be really great to have that type of impact and just to have that type of job. I always thought it was I've always been an independent person. I've always felt that I want to be rewarded or paid according to my abilities, my ability to work, my ability to do a job better than somebody else, those types of things. I've always been drawn to jobs where that was part of the process. And so I've always just felt that speaking was kind of the perfect blend of all the things that I enjoy doing, the impact that I wanted to have, and the independence that it affords you, because at the end of the day, it's all on you. There is nobody else. You can't call in sick. You can't be like, oh, I'm not going to go in today. If you have work, it's because you've done the work. If you don't have work, it's because you're not doing the work. And so it's completely relying upon yourself.
I love that. It really seems like from an early age, like in those later high school years, that you saw the difference of like what you were doing and what your friends were doing, and what they were getting caught up in as a result of paying attention to the, some of the early forefathers of the speaking age. And then that translated into, oh, I want to help other people have that same, what's the word, like almost escape, like get out of that rut that a lot of people fall into, mixed with naturally being independent and wanting to kind of do things your own way and being attracted to things like that. And then, also liking to present and being on stage. Seems like there are kind of three elements there that really came together there.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the best way to describe it. Most people don't admit it, but when you work as a professional speaker, you've got to have a little bit of narcissism in you. Like, you have to have that desire for some of that ego. I get my validity is from feedback from an audience. That's directly the way that my validation gets taken place. And so learning that early on and being able to find that in an avenue that would afford you the ability to do the things that you want to do, really was something that, I got really, really lucky in figuring that out early on.
That's critical, because we all need some sort of source of that confidence and that validation. And dude, I'm the same way. I mean, I'm doing broadcasts and podcasting in a show. Like, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. I can remember, I have this really early memory of being in a play in like third or fourth grade. And I don't know why that always stuck with me, but I knew that it was so much fun, like being up there and, being able to do that and present, and like the people are in the audience. Like, there's just something about that that's like magical. Of like,
there's a power to it. They're watching you.
Yeah.
And they're waiting for you to give that. I can't sing. I'm a terrible, terrible singer. I'm completely tone deaf. I really can't act very well. I could do a few things here and there. And so wanting to be on stage and wanting to deliver something, speaking was really the only other avenue I could go. I can't play a musical instrument. So I always joke I could have been a heck of a rock star. I just didn't have any talent in the musical field.
So when you came to that conclusion, how did you start to focus in on the content? Like what message? And I know you talked about it a little bit before, but like how did you really zone in on that content and hone that over time?
So I wasn't sure how to go about doing it. So I have like a journal from 11th grade that says I wanted to be a professional speaker, but I never really studied what that entailed. I just always knew that that was a possibility. I thought I would have to go do something first and then speak about that after the fact. And when I was in graduate school, one of our classes was kind of a general business class, and we had to write a business plan on whatever we wanted. And I chose to write it on a speaking and training company. And so I interviewed some people, I talked to some people, and I learned a little bit more about how you really get into it. And the best time to do it is when you have no bills, or when when you're not used to a certain lifestyle, when you're not, I was living somewhere for $180 a month in rent between my two roommates and I. It was really inexpensive living at that point in time. So drilling down the content, I think, is always the hardest part. People will always want to know, okay, I want to be a speaker. And then I always ask them two questions. Number one, what are you going to say? And who are you going to say it to? And those are the first two questions you need to answer. Who are you going to say it to? The better you can answer that question, the easier it is to get started marketing. Everyone always goes, oh, I'll talk to anybody. And yeah, that's great. But everybody is not a good market when it comes to really having good marketing dollars and getting the best ROI on that. So drilling down that content really becomes important, and looking at it from a crafting of a show. And I was fortunate because when I first started, I actually was doing somebody else's content part-time. There was a gentleman who was my early mentor who was in the college market, which is where I started. And he did a lot of dating and relationship shows, and he was really popular. And so he would be double booked a lot, which means he already had been booked, but they wanted that show. And then they would say, oh, we also have this person who can come and do the show as well. And so that really helped a lot, because I was able to inject my own ideas and my own thoughts and interweave it with content that was already established. So it was kind of like getting those trials slowly without having to write an entire show and then go present that show. You could just do little pieces here and there and slowly piece together a 45 or 60-minute crafted content.
So did you really build up one core talk, or did you have like a couple different things for a couple different audiences? And how did you decide specifically who you wanted to talk to?
I built one core talk off the bat. So my background and what I got my master's degree in was how to use games and activities to teach leadership and emotional intelligence. So I'm a big fan of active learning. So I had a lot of training elements that I could use if somebody wanted longer. If they said, oh, we've got 4 hours, I didn't want to talk for just me talking for 4 hours. So I had those types of pieces. But when I was looking at building a show, so to say, I basically built one show. And again, I started in the college market. And we called the show inspirational comedy from a marketing standpoint, because at the time in the early 2000s, college students wouldn't leave their room. They still won't leave their room for a speaker. Like, nobody just goes out to listen to a speaker. There were less things back then keeping them in their room than there are now, and they still wouldn't go out. However, they will come out for comedians. And what we learned is nobody gets angry if there's actual meaning to a comedy show. They don't get done and be like, well, that sucks. I wasn't supposed to think at all. Like, didn't really want to reflect about life. So we kind of use that as a marketing ploy. So I would fit in monthly comedy slots at different colleges. And the people who were bringing those in on the advisor side of things, they kind of got a win-win too, because they were able to fill a comedy slot and they felt that they were actually giving something of value. So I started blending and studying comedy and using comedy as an avenue to slip ideas and points in there. And so I said, all right, I'll build one show. And you're always tweaking it. You're always trying out new things, and it's constantly evolving. But I found it was easier to build one show and just build your audience from there than to try to constantly worry about which show you were going to do and which piece you were going to do. And I personally, it's just a lot easier to keep track of all that.
So it seems like your approach was you had this kind of core message of what you wanted to say. And then once you had the message, Then you went to the avenue of trying to figure out the best audience that you could reach. And that so happened to be college students. And you're like, okay, I have my message. I know who I want to talk to now. So now let me kind of blend it into their native ecosystem or like what they want and make it palatable to them so that they have ears to hear so that you can actually deliver the message to them in a way that they actually want to hear it.
Yeah, exactly. When you get started in the speaking world, that's the hardest aspect to figure out is how can I penetrate that market? Because it is a big market and it's getting bigger and bigger in that more and more people are speaking and more events are taking place and more influencers are looking at speaking as an avenue to expand their reach, expand their profitability, expand their revenue streams. And so the hardest part though is figuring out like, how do you get those jobs? Like, where are those jobs at? And luckily the college market at the time in the early 2000s had the easiest barrier to entry in that you could go to places where people who hire speakers and performers and comics and bands and hypnotists were at. So you could meet them and then showcase for them. And then if they liked what they saw, a 15, 20-minute showcase, then they might bring you to their campus to do an hour-long show. And so that's what really drew me to the college market initially, because it was a market that I had already been in. I had been involved on leadership levels in a couple of organizations on the national level within the college area. So I knew that area really well.
So once you started to get embedded into that, that market, how did it evolve from there? Like, where did you take it from that point?
So I got started there in the 1999, 2000 range. And I basically just said, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to focus on my career. I'm not looking necessarily to make money right away. So I would just pump money back into it. So I went to every conference I could go to. I went to every event. I did every show, regardless of what the fee was, as long as somebody wasn't lying about what they had. If they said, this is our budget. Okay, sure. Great. I'll be there. And I think that's a big proponent of getting started in any business, especially in a business like this, whether you're speaking or influencing. You've just got to work. You got to do. We spend so much money and so much time investing in things that we think will shorten that time frame. And there are some tools. You can always learn tools and tips and things that will help maybe shorten that a little bit, but you still got to work and you still got to really focus for a pretty long time before you really start to see. And so another good mentor had given me, they said, listen, you got to do this for at least 3 years. You got to be all in for at least 3 years, see where you're at after those 3 years, and then make a decision as to whether or not you should continue on that path or go look for something else to do. And so I had built out a little business plan that basically said, okay, in year 1, I want to do this number of shows. Year 2, I want to do this number of shows. Year 3, I want to be at this number of shows. And was pretty fortunate that through hard work and coming up with the idea for the dance and those types of things, I was able to be pretty much right on target for those first 5 full years.
So you set that plan, hit that goal, and then it seems like it was just clear, like, okay, I did what I needed to do. I got the results that I needed to get. Let's charge on. Yep,
pretty much. There are lots of different ways that you can look at this industry. Like many business, there's no right one way. But for me, I wanted to make sure that I was good enough on stage that people wanted to continue to book me. There are some people in this world who are really good marketers, and they do a good job of constantly marketing themselves, and they're constantly getting the gigs and they're doing the speeches, but they don't get a lot of referral business and they don't get a lot of repeat business. So they got to continually do the marketing side of things. And then if you're good, a lot of times there are people who will get the referral business, or somebody in the audience will see them and want to bring them to them. And then so you can build a nice business without having to focus as much on the marketing. Marketing's still important, and that always comes around, as you go. But if you're good and you've got a good message and you're authentic and you believe in what you're talking about, you can usually sustain a pretty good business within this industry over time by doing those things first. And then if you decide that you want to take it bigger and you want to go a larger brand, you know, then there's other avenues that you can go to help build that out.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about really finding that one thing that will help set you apart from every other speaker, right? And I want to talk about it from like the voice perspective of like really like owning your voice and figuring out like, okay, well, who am I really, and how can I let this shine through in my words, in my presentation, my content, and then also on the content side, like how to find that one thing. It seems like evolution is really like a cornerstone of your content. So let's talk about the voice. Like, how did you find that voice, own that voice, let that shine through?
I think that a lot of that comes down to your own personal philosophies and your own mindset towards the world. I've been a big reader. I've always been a big reader. I was reading when I was little. I kept reading. And I think the more you read and the more you experience life, the more worldly viewpoints you get. And that allows you to think about what you believe, why you believe those things. And the more you examine that, the more you get into tune about what you really feel and what you really believe. And that's hard for a lot of people to do. That's hard. We live in a world where we're constantly being manipulated, where we're constantly being told what we should want, where we should want to go, what we should want to buy, what we should want to eat, and all those things. And to really take the time to figure out what it is that we specifically want or what we specifically believe is a lot of work that people don't really want to do. And so when you do that, and whether you do it when you're young, whether you do it in your age, or you continually do it all the time, that I think is really, really key. Because yes, anybody can create a great show. You could write and you could rehearse and you could create a great show on stage. But I think the people that really have longevity and the people who really go on to be successful in the way they want to are the ones that show, so say, really lines up with the authentic person that they are, because that comes through in pretty much everything and anything that people do. And so figuring that out, I don't want to say it's difficult, but you still got to put some effort into it. You got to do some real thinking. And thinking seems to be something that people don't tend to do nearly as much as we used to, partially because there's a lot more other things that can take our time and attention away now.
Right.
That's a big part of it, I think, is that reflection time, the journaling time, the thinking time, the reading time, the listening to podcasts, the talking to other people, just using this brain that we have to constantly think about the world around us.
So it seems like it's really centered on self-awareness and understanding like, well, who actually am I? And like just not giving up on that and continuing to think about it, to learn, to read, to journal, to think, to reflect, to speak to other people. And it seems like there's also probably an element of like just doing it a number of times and like trying certain things. Like maybe you craft a show, you deliver it, it just doesn't feel right. So like, okay, there's something going on here. Maybe I'm just not putting enough of myself in the show, or maybe I didn't deliver it right, or something's off, and paying attention to that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting feedback from the audience and it's a long, I've been doing this for 20 years now. So it's hard sometimes to remember how I viewed things then versus how I view things now. I do know early on, one of the things that I was, had a friend that had a position. He worked with a lot of comics and he worked with a lot of big name comics. And I asked him once to watch my 20-minute showcase. And he came back and he said, "You're great. You're fantastic." He goes, are you okay with some notes? And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I've always been high energy. I've always been 100 miles an hour, talk really, really fast, kind of that type of thing. And he showed me this chart that he grafted, and it basically had a line that went straight up and then it went straight across. And he goes, "This is your emotional line for your whole 20 minutes. He goes, "You go right up from the get-go and you just go whoosh, all the way across." And he goes, "What I try to tell performers or people when they're doing on stage, whether it's a comic or a speaker, you want to do an up and down, up and down, up and down, from both an energy standpoint and emotional standpoint. You want these big differences between the peaks and the valleys as far as that goes, because that's what keeps people's brains engaged. That's what keeps people interested. it turns people off if you start low and just stay low. And it turns people away if you jump up high and just go all the way across. So I remember that early on being a real eye opener, something that I had never thought of, something that had never really kind of that. So finding mentors, finding other people who can help you figure those things out, you know, and that's the other hard part. We've got so much now. There's so many people out there with so much good content and so many good ideas. And then there's all the classics. There's all the early day philosophers and the early thinkers and all of those things. And so it's a matter of blending today's world and all the stuff that we have available to us with some of the old school stuff as well. And then just figuring that stuff out on your journey. I mean, I know it sounds superficial. It sounds wishy-washy, but that's really what it comes down to when you're trying to figure out when you're going to be speaking about your life and your experience and your belief system. You got to know what that belief system is.
So it seems like, and I'm glad we've come to this point in the conversation, it seems like there absolutely is no way to shortcut it. You just have to do the work and go through it and like figure it out.
Pretty much. I mean, if you've had a unique experience, if you've done something different than anybody else has done, a lot of times you can become successful in this business or you can have a run for a while because of that unique thing. And that's fantastic. That's great. There's so many people doing amazing things out there, and to hear their stories and to tell their stories. When I look at it from a long journey standpoint, you know, when I speak, I don't talk about the video. I don't talk about the YouTube viral video. It's a selling point. It's in the bio. But if you watched my whole show and didn't hear the introduction, you wouldn't even know I was attached to the dance until I did it at the very, very end. And I think that's fun when people come up and they're like, oh, I had no idea. Like, I didn't know you even talked, man. I just thought you did this dance thing or whatever. So my personal goal has always been longevity, sustainability. It's never been. So when the video did what it did, I decided consciously that I wasn't going to make my show or my speech about the video. And I think that's a big difference, because if you remove that piece, do I still have something to say? And so if you're talking about, you know, a specific instance, and I've seen plenty of people that have specific things who are incredible, and they're going to be able to work forever because what they did is just astronomical, or what they did is something that, you know, no one else has ever done, those types of things. But some stories are really unique. I mean, it's kind of like the life of a viral video now. I mean, it lasts about a day or two. And so if you have a big viral video and then you try to make a career out of that one viral video, you got to have some substance behind it. So yeah, there are definitely tips that you can learn, and there are ways that you can maybe shorten the time frame a little bit. But if you want to have a longer career, you got to build a bigger foundation, because like most things, the faster you rise, more likely the faster you're going to fall.
I think that's such an important concept of you have to build your foundation. Because to me, I think a lot of people really struggle to think long term. Like that's just what I believe. And you know, when you get an email that says, "Hi, my name is John. Buy my shit," it's like, oh well, clearly I don't want to have anything to do with John now. And so, like going for, you know, hey, my name's John. You know, I noticed that you're a fellow entrepreneur. I'd love to connect with you, or, you know, I'd love to have a conversation, or whatever, like going for the relationship, taking the long term, and like not trying to like squeeze every little bit out at the very beginning, but like actually taking the time to build that foundation. Oh man, that like you set yourself apart from everybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tremendous. And I also love what you said about not making one viral thing like the cornerstone of your whole career, because there has to be more. Like there has to be more, a better foundation, because
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
one. Yeah. So I thought that was very powerful.
Especially if it's about sustainability. If you want to do it in longevity, you know, if your entire goal is to get in, make a bunch of money, and then get out, yeah, there are definitely shortcuts. There are ways, you know, it's just like It's just like the real influencers online. You can buy followers, you can buy ad, you can do all those things to build up a following, monetize it, and then get out. Which, if that's your plan and that's your goal, by all means, rock it out. But mine has always been about longevity. Mine's always been about sustainability. And so it's never been about the quick fix. It's never been about okay, what product can I make? And then I'm going to sell a whole bunch of, and that's going to be, those types of things. It's about, what do I want to do day in and day out? And how long do I want to do it? And I've always just wanted to speak. That's what I enjoy doing. So that's always been my focus on pretty much everything that I do. And when you learn those things about yourself and you get that perspective towards life and where it is you want to go, then you get to funnel everything through that. So every decision, every opportunity that comes up, you get to say, is this going to help me continue on the journey that I want to be on? Yes. Okay, we'll do it. No. All right. Don't worry about it.
So let's move to that second part. We talked about the voice, and it seems like that's really centered around self-awareness. I want to talk about when you have that understanding of who you are and what you really want to do, how do you then use that and leverage that and own that to the point where you can then create, like, it seems like it's your hook. It seems like it's like the unique identifying thing about you, I believe you said earlier, the 7 habits of highly successful people, like working on the habits.
Yeah.
Or like evolution, right? So how did you craft this idea of evolution? What was that process for you? And how did you know that it was really like the right one for you?
It always resonated with me. The basis for most of my philosophies come from philosophy, religion, spirituality, and the Serenity Prayer is a fairly well-known prayer within the pseudo-Christian world, but it really has its foundations long, long before that, which is the whole idea of letting go of the things we don't have control over and focusing in on the things that we do. And that's not a new idea. That's not a modern idea. I mean, that's been around since we could talk, basically. And that was, I think, always just what resonated with me, even at an early age, was seeing so many people that I was friends with, listening to them and what they were concerning themselves with and what they weren't concerning themselves with. And in my mind, I was always just like, why are you not focused on these things? Like, why are you wasting your time talking about this, worrying about this? And I wish I could say that it was because of a specific moment, because of a specific book or anything like that. But I think rarely in life do we ever find those moments where it's like, oh, I read this one book and that just changed everything. Maybe you were slowly moving to that particular area or that particular thought process. And then maybe one thing happened that helped push you over the edge. And I don't know if it's a nature versus nurture thing. I don't know if I was born with that type of mindset in my mind, if that's the way it's always been. But that's the thing that always resonated with me. And as I've grown older, that's just continued to strengthen. I think that's one of those things I always liken, especially for the younger generation. Like, imagine if you were playing a video game, but you knew more about the game than the people you're playing with. Like, would you want to play that game still? And of course, they're always like, yeah, what an advantage that would be. And I think for my world and my life, me believing that about the choices that I make and the control and influence I do have in my own life, about letting go of the little things, about not sweating the small stuff, all that stuff. To me, that's like knowing more about the game than other people do. And I don't want to make it sound like I do know more than them, because I really don't. I mean, we're all idiots on this planet. That's the beauty of the world. When you look at collectively the knowledge that exists, and even you take the smartest person on the planet, they might know 0.00001% of the collective information out there, which just means we're all idiots. And the minute you can accept the fact that you know so little compared to everything else that's out there, you begin to see the world in this great curiosity mind. Like, you just love learning. I like learning. But if you can learn some philosophies early on and some good mindsets that really help, you really do kind of get a leg up on everybody else.
I love that. I love that. It seems like you almost got like you really bought into this idea, and it really spoke to you of, kind of filtering out the unimportant things and focusing on, like, hey, what's really important here? And it seems like that's kind of the ethos you live your life by. Therefore, it makes sense that that is the ethos that you speak about and try to share with other people, or not try, but share with other people.
Mhm.
And it seems like it's just so organic, where like, of course you would speak about that because that's just like, that's your thing.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think that's where when you're on stage, if you are talking about the things you believe, if you are living the thing, we see it in the headlines every single day. Such and such person, we just found out this about them. And people are like, oh my gosh, because it didn't align with what they claimed publicly. They were doing different things privately. And so for me, it's always been that way. I've always viewed that way. I mean, I remember an example. I played baseball when I was in college at a little small Division III school. And I had an opportunity to work on cruise ships during the summer as an intern for what my major was. But in order to do that, I had to go work a 1-week training time frame during baseball season, during my freshman year of baseball. And I went in and I was talking to the coach about it. And he basically said, I'm not going to tell you you can't. It was a Division III school, which is a little different. It's not like I was playing D1 ball with the hopes of becoming pro and things like that. But he gave me the option. He said, I can't tell you that you're not going to, but I will tell you, if you willingly miss games, you'll have to sit out 1 game for every game you miss. So I was going to miss 4 games, 2 double headers. And I said, okay. And so I ended up missing those 4 games and then missing another 4 games because I chose to go do that. And I didn't get angry at my coach. I didn't call my coach names or say it's unfair. I just literally said, okay, this is a choice I'm going to make, and this is a consequence that I'm going to pay to make that choice.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I really, really hope everybody who's watching and listening, I hope that's sinking in for y'all as much as it is for me right now, because like what you were saying, it connected so many dots in my head just now. So thank you so much for that. I've always been a proponent of taking the long-term approach to things, right? And we spoke about that a little bit earlier, but
Yeah.
I mean, from a young age, I always loved playing video games, right? And I love to play the strategy games where I could see like where I wanted to get to, and I knew that everybody else would make the wrong choices in the short term because they weren't thinking about how to best get to that long term. They just wanted like the immediate satisfaction. And like for whatever reason, that lesson has just stuck with me. And like what you were saying, like, man, that's so much more of my thing than I realized until just now. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that's good. I mean, I think that's a great way to view the world, because especially now and part of it is the way our brains develop, and everyone's brain develop a little bit different. But one of the last areas of the brain to develop is the ability to connect long-term effects over short-term decisions. So sometimes it is really just a matter of luck genetically that your brain either develops that earlier or develops that before other people. Because it can be really hard to forego short-term reward, knowing that long-term reward exists. And that's been a classic philosophical debate for a long, long time. I mean, and I'm guilty of it too. If I really understood the way finances work, I'd have been investing since I was like 5 years old, because compound interest is an amazing thing, but
Right.
You don't really get that until you're in like your 30s and you look back and you're like, oh, that's not good.
Right. That's so true. And like, what's interesting is because I do some speaking as well. And one of the last conferences I went to, I was actually talking about in the vehicle was marketing,
Mm-hmm.
but I was talking about why it's so important to take the long-term approach. And the example that I used was think like Warren Buffett, because he has a quote out there that says what he does is invest in good companies over long periods of time to let that compound, let the interest compound over time and just build on itself. Man,
Yep.
seriously, we're connecting some dots here, man. I feel like we're going through a whole little workshop here. So thank you again for that.
Sure.
When you got those pieces aligned in your speaking career? Like, you understood, okay, this is what I believe, these are my core values, this is my ethos, this is my voice, this is what I want to speak about, this is who I want to speak to. Well, what happened next? I mean, was that really when things started to skyrocket? Like, was that when the video took off and it seemed like everything just kind of came together and just absolutely took off? Like, what was the chronology there when you figured your thing, your basic foundation out?
So that was when, so if you look at my career, the video became an anomaly because I was actually doing more work before the video. The video allowed me to charge a little bit more. And so from a pure monetary standpoint, one of the other things that I have been fortunate of is I don't ever chased the dollar. Not saying that dollars aren't important. I do believe, financially speaking, we need to talk more about money and more about finances and understanding it and being open about it. But my goal as a speaker was never to get like grossly rich. Like, it was never, oh, I'm going to maximize this and I'm just going to keep going. It was to build a sustainable life, a life that allowed me to do the things that I want to do, which included taking time off and taking vacations and seeing friends and doing all of those things as well. So the first 3 years were a slow build. There was like, I think 25, I want to say it was like 25 shows, 50 shows, 75 shows, or like 20, like might have been like 20, 40, 60, something along those lines. And I built it up those years until I think year 5, which was right before the video took off. I did like 125 shows.
Wow.
And it was great. I was still young. I had the energy. I didn't see friends. I missed every wedding. Like, I did all the things that you're supposed to do as an entrepreneur and, forget about life for a while. And then when the video took off about a year later, so the ethos of learning that about myself really manifests itself pretty early. And I was able to nail down that message in a way that resonated with college students, because I was only a couple years older than they were. I had made the same choices and I'd been in the same situations they had at that age frame. So then when the video took off, I was now able to start charging a little bit more because I was able to do some things that give you more credibility and you get more visibility. And, fame is always one of those weird, unique things that you're not really any different than you were one day before the next, but now all of a sudden your value goes up in the eyes of people and an audience and things like that. And so that actually allowed me to not do as much work. So I was able to cut down on the number of shows, but still keep the revenue from a business standpoint at the same, if not even a little bit more, but not have to do the 125 shows, not have to put myself in a position that was probably not the healthiest to be on because every show you do is at least a day and a half, if not 2 days on the road. So 125 to 150 shows a year is 300 days on the road.
Wow.
And that sounds like a lot of fun and it can be good for a little while, but that's not good for the long term. And those types of ways. So there was definitely a moment in early on within those first year and a half of me really getting that message down and figuring that out. And that really, really helped. And I'm not going to lie, the dance has always been a great marketing piece along with a great crowd pleaser. There have been shows where I have not been on my game for multitudes of reasons, but then I finish up with a dance and people are just like, that was great. Oh my gosh, that's so fun. I did one show once and it was pretty bad. Multitude reasons. And one of the main people that the show was for, even like kind of jokingly was like, it's a good thing you got that dance at the end, isn't it? And I was like, yes, it is.
That's amazing. So it seems like you've also done a lot of work on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, I love the mindset of always learning and reading and growing and figuring out more about yourself. So at this point now, what questions do you still have about yourself?
Well, my biggest question is a couple of them. One is, what do I really want to do with the rest of my life? 2, like, how do I want to continue to evolve both as a speaker and as a human being? How do I want to, we live now I don't do the things that I know I'm supposed to be doing. And I do those by choice. I make jokes about how lazy I am, and one of my friends always tells me that I'm the most successful lazy person they know, because I can give you a blueprint of how you're supposed to become an influencer. I can give you a blueprint of how you're supposed to become a YouTuber. I know all of that information. I just don't do it. You know, I was lucky that I had a big viral video. I've got 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I don't put videos up. So I don't do all those things you're supposed to do now. And luckily, up to this point, it hasn't affected my business. I've still been able to do this number of speeches I want and earn the revenue that I wanted. But I'm starting to see that shift a little bit, that people are going online to get more research before they make a decision about who they're going to bring in to speak. Mm-hmm. So that means I need to be more conscious of that. I need to do a little bit more of the content offering. Like, I need to be putting out more content. And so the question I keep asking myself is, do I really want to do all that? Because that's not easy. You know, that's a lot of work. I mean, between the management of the time and the management of the tech side of things, it's either you got to pay somebody a bunch of money to do it, or you got to do it yourself, which is a lot of time. And every time you're doing that is time you're not doing something else. So that's my biggest kind of like where I'm at right now, trying to figure out, what do I really want to do? What do I want my next 5, 10, 15 years to look like? And what am I going to actually do about that?
And what have you discovered thus far?
I will let you know when I figure it out. So, I mean, I have a couple things in mind. I have a couple steps that I'm taking that kind of align with what I think and the way I see the world and the things that I enjoy consuming. You know, kind of realizing that we're pretty much everybody's in one or two parties anymore, maybe three. We're either consumers, we're creators, or we're curators. And then there's a few people that are critics, but we don't really like them because they think that they're creating, but they're not really creating. They're just, you know, being critical of somebody else's content. And so for the most part right now, I'm just a consumer. I consume other people's content. I consume other people's podcasts and books. So now it's about, do I want to become a creator? And do I want to take that time to create and then figure out exactly what's that look like? Like, what flag do I want to create under? Because I fight a lot with, we are in the day of the ego. You know, the influencer world is ego driven. It's not really, it's not as value driven. That doesn't mean people don't deliver value, but however, you know what it's like. You got to have, like, you're filling your ego a lot because that's what drives the constant doing that and doing that. And we're seeing a lot of backlash now with some of the early YouTubers and those people who were doing it for so long, who are having a problem. We're having a lot of mental issues and a lot of depression because it's not sustainable. That world of constantly doing that nonstop isn't sustainable for a good mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and social aspect of life. So it's about finding that balance there. Where can I become a creator, and how can I create and still give value, but not get to a point where if you get a good enough audience and then you don't put stuff out, then they start getting mad at you and people start saying mean things. And that's, I don't care how thick your skin is. I don't care how grounded you are. That hurts. It always hurts. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Like, where do I want the next few years to go?
Well, I am so interested to see what your decision is and where you decide to take it. That's exciting.
Yeah, we'll see.
Because it's almost like you have an opportunity to really do whatever you want. I mean, I know we always have that opportunity, but it seems like at this point, like, it seems like this is a transition point for you in some way. So it's just interesting. It's fascinating. Like, you could do anything. And what are you going to do?
It's really, it's a great space to be in. I met Seth Godin 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Had an opportunity to have a dinner with him the night before an event. And he and I actually had that exact same conversation because I was asking him, if you know who Seth Godin is, right?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, for people out there who don't know who Seth Godin is a really big influencer in the marketing world. He's been writing a daily blog for, I think, going almost 20 years now. He's written like 15 books, bestseller books every single time. And he was talking about how he was in he called it the white space. Like, he's just in a really nice white space because he really can he was financially secure. So he can really just kind of do whatever it is he desires to do. And he still had the discipline. He was still writing every day. And so for me, I'm kind of in that same space. Like I just get to kind of go, okay, what do I want to be next? And where am I going to put my energies at? The question will just be, how long will it take me to figure that out? And then actually choose and then move forward in that decision.
So have you put thought to like what you want your legacy to be? I mean, 5,000-10,000 years from now, what you want people to remember Judson for?
I mean, if they remember me 5 to 10,000 years from now, that'll pretty be miraculous, because we don't really remember much of anyone 5 to 10,000 years later.
Right.
And I think that's also, I used to joke sometimes when we would go to certain conferences where everybody asks you what you speak about. They're like, oh, what do you talk about? What do you talk about? And I used to have this running joke that I would just say, I talk about nothing. And then they would be like, oh, what do you mean? I'd be like, oh, I talk about the fact that you have to come to the realization that nothing we do matters. And until you recognize that, until you really learn to surrender to that, can you actually then truly commit yourself to doing something that does matter? And then they just look at you, they're like, and then they walk away, which is the whole reason for it in the first place. But there's an aspect to that realization that sometimes we get so wrapped up in believing that we're so important and I want to leave this legacy. And legacy really is just your ego talking, because you can leave a legacy and you can have lived a terrible life. You can leave a legacy and have been an asshole to every single person that you know. And so does that mean that you lived a good life when it's all said and done, because people remember you 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? And so I think it's finding that nice blend where you give enough value back, you're doing enough things that help people in enough ways that your relationships with people in your life are good. And then when you do pass on, people are able to carry on some of those ideas and some of those philosophies. So if somebody remembers me 15, 20 years after I'm dead, to me, that would be a victory. 5,000 years after I'm dead, I mean, I'm pretty sure ain't nobody going to be watching a YouTube video 5,000 years from now and be like, what the hell is that? They didn't really used to do stuff like that. I mean, we'll all be living in digital pods by then.
Yeah, I actually have no idea what's going to be going on 10,000 years from now, but I do believe the content will still be there. I think everything on the internet will still be there.
It will. I mean, that's when my video first went viral and I hit like 30 million views, which at that time was huge. The next closest video was at I think 11. So there were only like 2 videos that had over 1 million views. That was a lot. And I remember a friend saying to me, man, this thing could get to 100 million views. And I remember being like, there's no way. Like, that's not going to happen. And then I was lucky that I was the first video to ever hit 100 million views. And then it was just like, oh, like, when's it going to end? And it won't. It never will. I mean, it'll just keep, the internet's just going to keep building and building and building and building. And so that's where marketing and navigation and ease of finding, that's the other hard part now, is there's so many people putting out so much content that finding it becomes really, really difficult. And which is why the long game is more important, because you've got to build that body of work. Most people want something to go viral. And if you have something go viral, that's fantastic. But what really happens and what really makes somebody really successful is if they've got a great body of work and then something does go viral and then people go look at all their other stuff, and all that other stuff's really, really good. There's lots of stories of writer Simon Sinek, who writes several books and then has his Start With Why book, which becomes his big thing. And then all of his other books sell a whole lot more because now people want more Simon Sinek. Or Tuesdays with Morrie, when that book came out, most people don't know the guy that wrote Tuesdays with Morrie is a sports writer and had been writing a weekly sports column in the Detroit Press for years. And then they're like, oh, he's got other books, and they go and look at that other stuff. So that's why the long game and putting out quality stuff is always so important. And then maybe you do have that moment where something goes big or it goes viral, and then you've got the rest of that body of work to go with it. So I guess from a legacy standpoint, to go back to your actual question, I don't really think in terms of legacy. That's just never been something that my ethos and my philosophy is. And maybe I will later on, maybe in the next several years. I'm 43 now. Maybe when I hit 50, I'll be like, okay, what do I really want to leave behind And I think that's partially because I still believe I have so much more life to go that I don't think in terms of, okay, what am I going to leave behind?
That's an interesting point of like, there's still so much to do now.
Yeah.
It's not quite yet time to think about later on. Because I think about that all the time. Like, one of the reasons why I love doing what I do with the show is I know that in 10,000 years, the show will still be here.
Yeah.
And, I don't really like talking about like tactical things that will work for the next 5 to 10 years. Like, I want to talk about like real things, evergreen things, like finding your voice, or how to actually identify, okay, what is my thing, or like a building, or getting more in touch with the essence of who you are. Like, that is going to be relevant to humanity forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
Forever.
think that's what's cool is you're talking about things that are universal. If you have somebody on and they are an expert in TikTok marketing, they'll in 50 years from now, they'll be right next to the person that was an expert in Vine marketing. Like,
Right.
those things are going to come and go, and that's one of the hardest things is in the business world is that constant, okay, what's new? What's next? What do we got to, but foundation beliefs and foundational business is always the same. There's that old phrase, everything changed, but nothing's different, or everything's different, but nothing's changed. And so what's good about the things that you're talking about are things that will never change, that finding that core of who you are, figuring out what's important to you and what's important to your world is going to be universal for all time.
Exactly. And that's why I am eternally grateful for incredible people like yourself who take time out of your busy schedule to come on the show and share your opinions and thoughts on this. So
my not so busy schedule, though, don't forget, I'm a lazy person. So
well, I appreciate you still coming on the show.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Very meaningful for me. I do have one more question for you. I want to be
Sure.
respectful of your time. So what question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
That's a good question. What question should you be asking me? I mean, I can't think of any question that, and that's it was interesting, in the pre-conversations and things, you talk a lot about not selling and not pushing and not, and that's never been me. Like, I've never built something that I then, like, I would love to go on television shows, but I'm a terrible guest because they always say, okay, what do we need to make sure that we mention? What do we need to make sure that we're pushing? And I'm like, nothing. Like, no, there's no book launch. There's no new thing coming out. Like, that's not my ethos. So I don't have a question that I'm like, oh, you need to make sure that you ask me this question because I've got this answer like teed up and ready to go. But I mean, I think one of the things that is kind of my overall blend of concepts is recognizing that life is about progress. It's not about perfection. Life is about only comparing yourself to yourself on a continual basis, not comparing yourself to other people. And then trying as hard as you possibly can not to fall into the trappings of what everyone else and everybody else is trying to get you to believe. Fighting through that world of consumerism and consumptionism and marketing and all those things. If you want to buy something because you want it, go buy it. But if you want to buy something because you believe it's going to give you, get you, or make you something else, then you need to really take the time to reflect on why it is that you want that thing.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And, Judson, I do want to express my gratitude once again and say thank you very, very much for coming on the show. This has been very special for me, and I'm very grateful for the time that you shared. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And to everybody who's watching and listening, I want to thank y'all very, very much. And I will see everybody on the next episode.